Hello everyone, it is Cece. I'm the host of the Melon system, and today we are going to be talking about what are the difference between fictive alters, introject alters, and animal and non-human alters. Because I feel like a lot of times people overlap these terms, which is totally fine because a lot of people use fictive and introject as an umbrella term. But this video we're going to go deep and in depth in almost everything. Before I start this, I do want to mention that if you are a fake claimer and automatically think if someone has a fictive, that means they're faking, let me explain to you why sometimes fictives or alters that represent a show or a character is actually pretty common. That is because when a child is actually dealing with these traumatic events, let's say that they are having repetitive trauma, obviously. But every single time when they are out of that trauma or have a break from that trauma, they're watching a show. Let's say that that cartoon or show is Mickey Mouse or it is Monster High. That's the only comfort that they truly have. So their brain will attach to that because our brains are not always going to be able to make up brain-made alters. Of course, there are brain-made heavy systems and there's going to be fictive heavy systems. It's very, very different. It really depends on the kid. So like I was saying, this child is watching this daily, so their brain's going to attach to it and they are going to have an alter that can present as Mickey Mouse or a Monster High character like Dracula or Claudine. And since that trauma is formed that way, our brain's main coping mechanism, if we're feeling stressed, that there's a new trauma or triggered, that is the coping mechanism that the child's brain has created. So when they're stressed or if there's a new trauma, they're going to split off these parts. And a lot of time when a person hyperfixates or watches something or looks at a character over and over again, especially if there is a lot of trauma that is unprocessed, it can create a fictive. And this is 100% valid. If you are a fictive heavy system, an introject heavy system, or an unhuman alter heavy system, that is completely fine. Now let's go into what a fictive is. So a fictive is a fictional alter that is usually comes from, like I said, a show, a character, or even a drawing. Something that is fictional, that is like another person in a show, that is a fictive. So for example, let's say, which is really common, is that you will see a lot of systems who have a toga fictive from MHA, My Hero Academia, or Miku, or what's another one? Sundrop or Moondrop, those kind of things. Those are fictives. And one thing that people kind of get confused is fictives are not the same as their source, meaning that for us personally, some alters that are fictives can look like that source, but act nothing like it or identify with it at all. Let's say they are a fictive, they look that way, and their name is that, but they're like, I don't act like that. What they've done, my source, I haven't done that. That is just what I look like. And for others, it could be complete opposite. They can have those memories that have never happened to the body, but have those memories of being that fictive. So let's say that they are Freddy Fazbear. They have those memories of being Freddy Fazbear. And I know it may sound pretty confusing, but this is how the brain has learned to cope. So when an alter is a fictive, don't automatically think that if they're toga that they're just going to bite you or that they're going to try to suck your blood. Like, that's not what it is at all. What you need to understand is that for us personally, when we have fictives, they identify more with how they look and what their names are. That's what a fictive really is. Now, an introject. Introject is an alter that is of a real person, a real place, or a real thing. So this is where things can get kind of confusing for singlets. An introject most of the time is of a real person or I guess you could say a non-human alter as well, but that also has its own category. So an introject can also be an object. It can be a doll. It can be a stuffed animal. Because a fictive is more something that has already been created, that is more fictional, and that has its own show, has its own toy. And when it comes to an introject, a lot of times kids, their introject can be a reflection of their abuser. They can form an introject or an alter that is their abuser, or that acts that way or looks that way. A lot of times that is pretty common. And introjects can also be of, let's say, a president like Obama, or a singer. That's an introject. Now, as it is as before, an introject can identify as these people and what they look like, but aren't their source and don't act like them. But for some and most introjects, they do act like their source. And a lot of times it's to hold that trauma, because there is always a reason for each alter. That doesn't mean that they need to have their own specific role. That doesn't mean that they have to have a protected purpose. Every alter is there for a reason. And even as a system, not everyone's going to know what that reason is. But your brain does. Your brain knows that reason. Now, a non-human alter. A non-human alter also overlaps with an animal alter. So non-human alters, basically that's a whole umbrella. So a non-human alter is an alter that could be a vampire, that can be a mermaid, that can be a unicorn. An animal alter is more of a factual and real animal, as a dog, a cat, a bunny. Those are non-human alters. There are many reasons why non-human alters are created. A lot of times as a kid, there is a type of abuse where people or their abusers will tell them, you're a monster, you're just an animal, or things along those lines. And a lot of times our brain, as before, attaches onto that and create a monster alter or a dog alter. A lot of times as a kid, they may have a childhood pet, or they may feel attached to this certain animal and they love this animal and it makes them feel safe. So they split off those alters. That's what non-human and animal alters are. Now, the main reason why we are making this video is to show that there are a lot of umbrella terms surrounding different types of alters. For example, a fictive and a factive. A factive and a fictive are way different. And a lot of times they will get overlapped. A lot of times introjects get overlapped. Non-human alters get overlapped. And it's good to know these real terms and what they really are in an educational situation, but never feel bad for accidentally naming those things wrong. It is perfectly fine not to know all the terms, especially if you're a system of your own. Being a system has its own terms and its own terminology, and it can be really hard to catch up with. And if you are a singlet as well, it's okay not to know everything. There are so many things that even systems themselves don't know, and scientists don't know. There are so many terms that people in the system community has created to make it easier to explain what different alters and different symptoms of a system is. And it's completely fine not to know all of these. So don't stress out or feel like you're less valid because you don't know the difference between a fictive, an introject, a non-human alter, or an animal alter. That is completely okay. And one thing to remember, if someone is fake claiming you immediately, don't feel like you have to answer their question. But if you do want to educate them, feel free to just let them know why fictives and non-human alters or introjects are created. You don't have to go into every single term. You can just say a fictive or an unhuman alter. A fictive is something that a child's brain attaches onto. If they're going through traumatic things and they keep reading this book, keep looking at this toy, keep watching this show, it's going to split off into their head and attach on. And if they don't believe you, then that's on them. And if they want to do more research, let them do more research. But it's not your decision, it is not your choice, and it's not your responsibility for what people think. And people who fake claim don't really have anything else to do. But I hope this helped you, and stay sneaky!